Okay, you should be good to go, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk, and good evening, Council, staff, invited guests, and the general public. Welcome to our special meeting of Council for Monday, May 31st. Before we start the Council meeting, I just want to read a statement that was provided from myself this morning as the Warden of the Counties. It reads, the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, including its local municipalities, is expressing deep sadness and sympathy following the discovery of the remains of 215 children buried at a former residential school in British Columbia. We are heartbroken, and the discovery of the remains should galvanize all Canadians in doubling our efforts to root out systemic racism and pay tribute to the Indigenous children who lost their lives while being forced into a residential school system that should have never existed. At least 3,200 children died amid abuse and neglect as part of the residential school system in this country. Not enough has been done to call attention to the cultural genocide that this school system inflicted upon First Nations and to acknowledge the pain experienced by Indigenous people for generations. Our friends, the Mohawks of Akwesasne, and all First Nation people deserve more from us. A greater accounting of the terrible injustice inflicted upon all Indigenous people in our country will lead to a better understanding of the culture and traditions that have been lost. The flags at the County Administration Building and all municipal offices throughout SDNG have been lowered as a small sign of sympathy and respect. It is now up to all of us to ensure that the gestures are followed with action in condemning the crimes of the past and putting into place measures that root out evil today and in the future. That was a press release that was signed by myself this morning. So I have a motion moved by Lyle Warden, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the May 31st, 2021 special council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 7:02 p.m. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. I have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda, Madam Clerk?
No, there are none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything from members of council? Not seeing none, so the motion would be as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Not seeing none. We'll move into presentations and delegations. Well, first, will the Cornwall Regional Airport background and history. I'll ask Mr. Mills to go through that part of it, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So through you, tonight I'd like to welcome Christian Perot from Explorer Solutions. Prior to that, I want to just give council a brief overview of the Cornwall Regional Airport. The picture there you see is the airport. It's in South Glengarry on Airport Road. Single runway, 3,500 feet. Paved runway, and it goes east to west. If we've all been to the airport, it's a modest airport that's regional and not too much commercial. Located, as I mentioned, in South Glengarry in the counties, services also the city of Cornwall. We also have a number of people from outside of region that come. Operated by the Cornwall Regional Airport Commission and jointly funded by the city of Cornwall and the Township of South Glengarry taxpayers. I mentioned recreational purposes, small craft. There's also a flight school there. A lot of action there with medical, emergency transport, search and rescue, and police operations, and also a flying club. This is of note because there have been a number of questions since I came to South Glengarry about the airport, but also recently with our articles in the media and since we put the report up and conversations between the city of Cornwall and South Glengarry. I think of note the recreational users you see there from Ottawa, Montreal, and surrounding areas. So while it's a regional airport run by South Glengarry, jointly with South Glengarry and Cornwall, it's more than that. We have aircrafts coming from east to west, north and south, stopping for fuel. Canada Border Services uses this and the Cornwall Flying Club. We also have, in non-COVID times, a number of special events that are hosted at the airport that you see there. But I think of more significance there and is the government and commercial users. We have the flight schools, the OPP and the RCMP, so that's public safety, along with the Canadian Armed Forces with search and rescue. Ontario Ministry of Health, recently we had a medical transfer with an organ donor in the city of Cornwall. We know how important that is for, comes down to minutes and hours sometimes. The Ministry of Natural Resources, and then you see a comprehensive list there of some commercial flights that do come in, not a lot, but some. The history dates back to 1973. It was owned by Cornwall Aviation at the time. Just under 3,000 square feet, 3,000 feet on the runway with an apron area and hangar and office building. It's 1984, and that has also come up in a number of discussions. The agreement dates back to then and hasn't been updated since. So the city of Cornwall, and at the time it was the township of Charlottenburg, purchased the airport, and that's the structure you see today with the Airport Commission. And the management of the airport was given to Cornwall Aviation. There's a sort of a timeline that you see from 1973. Some updates when you get into the new century of significance that you see on in 2008 is the card lock system for self-serve fuel, jet fuel in 2016. An upgrade system with a chip pin and a GIS approach. The governance of the airport, this has also been discussed quite a bit, including tonight at the City of Cornwall meeting that happened at 5 o'clock. The funding is joint between the City of Cornwall, 85% of operational costs, and the Township of South Glengarry, 15%. Representation between the two municipalities equal, 6 members with 3 and 3. Holding office for 4 years. For the Township of South Glengarry, it's Mayor Prevost, Deputy Mayor Warden, and Councillor Lang. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Perot and to speak about the business development plan. There was an RFP that was put out to seek ways to generate revenue and reinvent the airport. This has been talked about for many years. Explore Solutions developed the business plan with the ultimate goal of, in the future, making the airport self-sufficient. The 3 members of the commission, along with myself, who's the representative from the township administration on the commission, have seen this report many times. But we thought it was a good idea to bring it to not only full council, but to our constituents, the general public, and for the media as well. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Christian Perot, the Executive Vice President of Explore Solutions, and he will do a presentation now.
Thank you, Mr. Mill. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. May I take the screen share to bring the presentation up? Okay, just going there. Perfect. You should be seeing my screen right now. Okay, I'm just going full screen. You're seeing 2 images. We'll go like this. Okay. So good evening, everyone. I have about 30 slides, trying to do about a slide every minute. So I've got about a 30-minute presentation. which we'll leave questions afterwards. Or if you'd like to jump in, please do so. No problem on my end. Mr. Mills did give you a perspective of the airport. So we had 8 parcels of land we were working on, but for sure concentrating mainly on parcel A and C, which are where aviation activities are occurring. But the airport also owns and manages a number of other land parcels. So the airport is a registered airport. 2 types of airports in Canada, registered and certified. You need to be a certified airport to host commercial scheduled service. So the Air Canada, WestJet of this world. But with the proximity of Ottawa and Montreal and as well Kingston, probably no chances of really going down that path. So being registered is perfect, reduces the amount of rules and bylaws you need to abide by, and as well the associated costs. As Mr. Mill mentioned, so the airport's mainly a recreational pilot flight training, but as well medevac, search and rescues, and others. At this stage, so the airport has a decent size number of hangars, so about 20 hangars or so. But even through hangar leasing and fuel sales, the airport budget is still at a deficit, which both communities have to balance. So the objective of the mandate to grow activities and raise recurring revenue, so to try to make the airport self-sustaining financially. So through our report or through our mandate, we held a series of engagement and consultation with over 70 stakeholders, economic leaders, airport tenants and users, academia, native communities, tourism office, and so on. We conducted a benchmarking of 5 similar airports, reviewed industry data and analysis, then went out to propose various development options supported by financial modeling. And we did a review of airport operation management and budget, which we'll address in the presentation. As part of the engagement, so the main comment that were proposed, so some mainly of the airport tenant would like to see a parallel taxiway built to the runway to ease volume of or exiting the runway and not using it to taxi back and forth. Some also suggested to have a longer runway to be able to host larger aircraft. Municipal infrastructure is an issue, so water, sewer is not on site. As well, the reliability of cell phone and internet connectivity is of major concern, especially in these days and age of web-based or home-based working. So the airport is well located between the triangle of Montreal, Ottawa, and Kingston. NAV Center in Cornwall is a key aviation player and could be a partner. Some of the discussions might lead to opportunities for the airport. Some people thought that bringing back a airport restaurant would be added value. Was one before that was working pretty well, but has to be replaced. Attracting more flight training activity, especially with the Montreal airspace getting busier and busier, is an opportunity and a good value add project. The airport also needs a new terminal. The one that's in place is pretty old, working out of an old trailer. And for sure, right now, there's no marketing activity really at the airport, no investment attraction. So no one is really attracting new business to the airport. In terms of a quick market data, and we'll start at the lower left side here. So just a quick perspective. So the blue line is the Ontario market, the orange one, the Quebec. So you see that in Ontario, there's 10,200 aircraft registered with Transport Canada. Out of that amount, 8,500 of those are privately owned, so small general aviation aircraft. You see the data in Quebec for the overall fleet. Out of that, 6,500 are general aviation airport. So technically, you're the same clientele you have at your airport. You've got 15,000 of those aircraft in both provinces. The graph on the top left side. So you see that out of all of the aircraft in Canada, that's about 35,000 total in Canada, 70% of those aircraft are recreational and personal aircraft. So the smaller types of aircraft. Then business without flight crew, so charter operators and others, about 8%. Flight training, 7%, and you see the others. But if you look at the similar graph to the right side, so you'll see that even though recreational aircraft represent 70% of the fleet, they account for just 30% of expenses, 37% of expenses. So it's a large market, but they're not the group that flies the most. As if you look at flight schools, they got 7% of the market, of the number of aircraft, but they represent over 20% of activities at airports. So looking at our airport, flight instruction is probably a key component going forward, as well as charter operation represent 8% and they drive 13%. The map of Canada at the bottom right side here is to show you the location of business jets. So business jets, it's a different type of aircraft by itself. So if you own a Cessna 172 and you purchase it used 100,000 or new at a 400,000 or 500,000, if you own a business jet, you're in the lower end, you're paying 4 to 5 million for your aircraft. If you're at the higher end, you may pay up to 55 million for an aircraft. So different size of budget, different size of clientele. One that is very averse to any fees, which is a general aviation, and one that doesn't mind paying $100 for landing fees and $200 to pay to park an aircraft. So the business jet side. In terms of the colors, so you see that Ontario and Alberta are the most active market for business jets. So there's about 1,900 business jets in Canada, 20% or more of that clientele, so about 400 aircraft are located in Ontario and about the same in Alberta. You see that Quebec and BC come in second with about 15% each. So again, some of the top 2 Canadian markets or top 3 Canadian markets are right beside your airport. Then if we look at flight training, so you see that the need for pilots over the next 10 years estimated at about 30,000 pilots worldwide. So the largest flight training schools are in North America, the US #1, Canada #2. That's where the pilots get the best training, best rules, instructors, everything. So the key is, and the quality is in North America. Well, the US produces about 10,000 pilots a year. And just in the US, they'll need 13,000. So the US is short 3,000 pilots. And the Canadian market, the Canadian flight schools produce about 1,200 pilots a year. And in Canada alone, we need about 1,800 pilots a year. So there's a huge gap still to be filled. And that's where the market is very interesting to try to bring more students. Definitely, there's an influx from students from Asia, as the Asians market are just growing at a crazy rate. And they don't have the staff to fly all of those aircraft. So they're looking for North America to support them, even though we're still in a shortfall from our own needs. So the value proposition, please keep in mind that so we've been retained to do a business development service plan. So our vision is that the airport should be positioned as a low-cost, well-maintained, fully serviced general aviation airport. When I say low cost, you'll see it in our fee, in the fee structure we analyzed. So right now you're already by 10 to 20% lower than most other airports. So there's a gap that we're suggesting to bridge, but still keep a certain margin to remain around that positioning. Going on that path, we're looking to leverage for sure Montreal and Ottawa. So both major centers where you've got a lot of aircraft. As you see, we took out Kingston here, where Kingston is a competitor around that side. Visibility, immediate access to Highway 401 is a key component. So you're in and out of the airport within 2-3 minutes and on the highway to your final destination. You have unrestricted airspace. If you'd like to fly in Montreal, you've got a major problem. You need to go around Montreal Trudeau, in some part, avoid St. Hubert as well. So there's a many situation a pilot needs to consider as if you're flying out of your airport. So no issue traveling or training, basically. You've got limited residential housing in the vicinity, so no noise complaint, so we can grow aviation component without having residents complaining. And then we're just a short distance from the nav center and the potential that does offer for the airport. In terms of the development plan itself, so we looked at all parcels. And again, as I mentioned earlier, our focus is mainly on parcel A and C. So what we're suggesting is to grow parcel A, and you'll see it in 2 slides, to make parcel A into a commercial and corporate aviation development zone. So trying to attract the larger aircraft, the aviation services that go with all aviation to that location. And parcel C, just skipping ahead. So parcel C would be the expansion of the general aviation. So the smaller aircraft would grow in parcel C. So parcel B, part of G and H would be part of the runway expansion project. So they would lose land to that project, but we're considering or suggesting to keep ag development in the rest of those parcels. And parcel D and E, so an airport signage facing for the 401 and as well agriculture. And if we're to expand the runway, it entails that we need to move Airport Road, and there's a high cost for that. But Airport Road would then be pushed in parcel F. It would also touch BG, coming back to his main heading along B and C. But parcel F, there's also, you see kind of a stream in there, so there's a lot of wetlands. So nothing much that we could do with F at this stage. Moving the Airport Road seems to be the best situation. So looking at parcel A, that again, we're trying to move as a corporate and commercial center. So the context is that you're stuck with an old terminal, not really very welcoming. It's also far from the car parking area. So developing parcel A, we're trying to address that. The airport road alignment, as I mentioned, is restricting the development of parcel A. So addressing that as well. And a fair number of tenants and users were requesting a longer runway. So the proposed development for parcel A includes an extension of the runway 1028, by about approximately 1,500 feet and widening it to 100 feet. Right now it's at 30 meters, so about 65 feet or so. And we're moving that to the east because we cannot go west with the expansion. Then the development of a taxiway branded Charlie, taxiway C for Charlie, to reduce runway congestion, avoid aircraft having to backtrack on the runway. It will also help with the development of 16 acres to set up those corporate and commercial hangar. Construction of a multi-use terminal. So the vision here is that the new terminal would host the restaurant, would also host boarding rooms for the flight school, and as well a hangar to store aircraft. So the airport would make revenue off of the restaurant, off of the hangar, off of the boarding room. So kind of a multi-use facility that would also include for sure the airport administration and others, but trying to find ways to make the investment sustainable on the long run. So the types of activities we're looking at, so flight training, aircraft maintenance, as I've mentioned, and the runway expansion. So here's the proposed development plan. So you see the expansion of the main runway here, and you see it's cutting Airport Road, which is right here at this stage. So we need to relocate Airport Road, so it's showing in here, but in our report, it cuts back across here and then back down to meet the other connection. So that's a major project. Just the road itself, I think we're estimated at close to 4 million just to do that relocation of the road. What it does, as mentioned, is opens up, that's the green box here, 16 acres for development. not showing on this image, but showing in Parcel C in our report. We're opening up another 9 acres on this side of the property here to add more general aviation hangar. So the terminal right now is a small building right here. So we're suggesting to move into a 10, 12,000 square foot building at this stage with a parking lot very close. You see right now the terminal is here, the parking lot is here. It also, if we were to do that, opens up the land right here for there's room for about 2 4,000 square foot hangars. So there's no real expense related to developing those hangars, and they're already facing the ramp there. And then you've got the development of 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on the size, hangars down the new airport road relocation, but making good use. Taxiway Charlie is right here in yellow, connecting to the expanded runway. So looking at the financials around this, why should we go and why should we do this? So a few elements to consider. So this chart here, it's a land lease approach. So we're showing you, that's what the airport is doing right now. So you're leasing land to tenants and tenants build their own building. What we're suggesting in this slide is the same approach. The next slide, as you'll see, we're suggesting that you become an airport, that you become a building owner. And you'll see the difference in terms of revenues. So here, lesser risk, okay, but lesser revenues as well. So you see the revenues over 5 years and 20 years. And that includes boarding room revenues. Oh no, sorry, the boarding room are in the next one. So it includes just fuel purchase, land lease, as well the taxation that goes with it. And we've got 2 models here. So a model that if you're getting grants, but you still need to invest 30%. And we've got another model where you're getting 90% of grant and you have to invest 10%. So the 2 numbers at the bottom here, so the first line in gray is at 30%. The second line is at 10%. So you see that if you have to pay 30%, you're losing 2.5 million after 20 years. You start gaining in back slowly but surely, and you're down to just under $1 million in losses after 40 years. So basically, it'll take about 55 years for you to start making money. The other approach at 10%, sorry, I lost my mouse here. Okay, there we go. So at 10%, after basically about 7 to 8 years, you start making money. Not that much, but you're still making about 330,000 over 20 years. And at 40 years, you're at 2.3 million, okay? Still takes a few years to get down to zero. The revenue is not that much. If you split this on 20 years, you're looking at 15,000 profit a year. Still not bad, but not paradise. Keep in mind here that we did not budget the fuel sales. So if you're generating this and having new aircraft, the fuel sales would go up, but they're not listed here. Then on the owner side, so if you were to own the building, so same approach, 30%, 10%. So if you look at the 10%, the gray line here, so year 1, you're still losing 176,000. You're up to 765 as you're building more hangars going forward. And at 20 years, you're down 2.2 million, but you have a building value of 5 million. So if you were to sell those buildings, technically you're making 2.7 million after 20 years instead of 330,000. And if you go to 40 years, you're still down 2.6 million, but you've got a building value of 8.9. So technically you're making 5.7 million in revenues if you were to sell those buildings. So different approach, higher costs because you're paying for everything. You're paying for the terminal, you're paying for all infrastructure. So it's a higher budget, but the return is much better than if you're just leasing land. And but for sure, it's a bit riskier business. Now, understanding that this model is has some ups and downs, let's move to Parcel C. Oh, Paul, just forgot this one before we go to Parcel C. So to support more aviation activity, we also suggested to create tourism packages. So you've got in the region very interesting tourism activities. Keep in mind, we've got 15,000 general aviation aircraft in Ontario and Quebec. So the objective is to try to bring each year, and this model is based on only 200 visits, so 200 aircraft coming in annually, bring in people that will land at the airport. They will usually pay some either a parking fee or fuel fees. And then these people will just rent a car and go out to visit various activities. So the packages are based on the various events and festivals. Could be another one around cycling and trails, another one around fishing and angling, another one around the Lost City or scuba diving in the St. Lawrence. So the project here, if you look at the middle green line, doesn't bring that much. So we're looking at 203,000 over 20 years. So about 10,000 a year for the airport. What is interesting is the economic impact. So the economic impact for the entire region is about 1.8 million, 1.9 million. So even though you're not driving that much for your airport, you're still helping your entire community through those aviation packages. And you see, we put in here promotion and marketing. So we built in about 25,000, 26,000 year one. So over 20 years, we're spending about 68,000 total. Keep in mind that right now there are tourism grants that could cover those costs to develop these packages. So moving to Parcel C. So Parcel C is probably your most interesting parcel. And as you'll see in the development phases later on in the presentation, that's the one we suggest you go for initially. Why? Because you've got a lot of land available, and with a limited investment, you will make the most return on it. So the vision here is to grow the general aviation area, add 2 taxiways that would allow a different type of hangars, because right now you've got small private hangars, so all box hangars. So we're suggesting to add T hangars and as well some larger corporate size hangars, and it includes moving the tie-down area. So let's start with the image to the right here. So everything that has a orange roof are a building that already exists today. But everything that is yellow, red, and black are empty spaces. So what we're suggesting is you're able to build all of these buildings here. So there's about 20 of those at no cost at all. Either you're leasing the land and there's really no cost, or you're building them so you'll have the construction costs. But there's no need to add taxiways, no need really to add electricity. All of it is already on site. So that would generate the best revenues rapidly. And right now underneath, you see some aircraft here. So these are tie-down areas. So remember that land here that we are able to open. So we were still able to use this parcel even though the runway is not expanded. So we're suggesting to move these aircraft to this area and just work with a grass taxiway, again, to limited cost to moving that. Then the first round of expansion would be to drive 2 taxiways going west, where you could locate in the middle T hangars, and on each side, so larger corporate hangars. So these hangars here are on average 15 to 1,800 square foot. So here we're suggesting 2,000 to 4,000 square foot hangars, again, driving more revenue. So the cost, you'll see the cost for these 2 taxiways minimum, it's about 200,000. So here on this slide, so you've got both model on the same slide. So land leasing on the left side, and you see that as in year one, including the extension of the taxiway, so you're losing $2,400. But within the first 5 years, you're making about 74,000. Over 20 years, you're making 1.1, and over 40, 2.5 million. So here, this is becoming very interesting. Little cost, very small cost, good revenue. If you go to airport-owned hangars, Well, here as well, the profit is even better, even though your cost is higher. So year one, you're already making some money. You're up 50,000 from the land lease over 5 years. You're up 630,000 over 20 year, and you're up 1.1 million over 40 years. Okay, so that's why we're suggesting that Parcel C should probably be your first target in moving the airport forward and trying to reduce your operation costs and alleviate them in the long run. At the same time, it would give you a bit of extra funding if you need to, when you'll need to support the runway expansion. The last aviation related revenue component, or I should say new revenue component, and you'll see what I mean in the coming slides. So it's Parcel E. So it's setting up a double-sided aircraft signs close to and visible from Highway 401. You see the revenues that it generates. So the two-sided one, or sorry, the single-sided one generates about 49,000 over 20 years and 41 for the double-sided one. So it's not big revenues, but still it's another add-on to the entire. And the other thing, it gives you visibility, which you don't have right now, accounting for that you're very close to the highway. So kind of a double pluses here in doing a small project. Now, beyond those developments, we also look at the airport operation today to see how you could raise or gain more revenues. And there's a number of possibilities. So the first one is a monthly parking fee. So aircraft at the airport that stay there annually will pay a parking fee, which is right now at $69 a month. The benchmarking gave us results anywhere from $80 to $100 for general aviation aircraft. So what we're suggesting is that you bring your prices up by $11 a month. Don't think that will make anyone go away to $80 per month. Understanding you still have a bit of room if you want to go to 85 or 90. On the land lease rate, so right now your land lease rate is at $26 per month. The average in Ontario is 29 to 32 cents a month. So we're suggesting that you bring your land lease rate up to 28 cents a month. And along the same line, not all of your leases are indexing annually or every 3 years or 5 years. So we're suggesting that you implement that indexation, probably tied to the CPI, could be annually CPI increase, but at least you're not leaving money on the table, but you're not hitting your tenants with a big amount. In terms of landing fees, so again, you have no landing fees today. So the objective here is to help support infrastructure rehabilitation and the maintenance costs associated with it. Understanding that general aviation aircraft owners are opposed to any fee. They've got a strong association, COPA, doing a lot of lobbying. So what we're suggesting and what we've seen in the benchmarking as well, so that aircraft that are lighter than 2,000 kilogram usually don't pay landing fee. That's kind of a unique, it's across the country. But for all other aircraft, technically turboprop aircraft, aerial work aircraft, so everyone that is making money with their aircraft or operating a larger aircraft, as we said, a business jet worth 10 million. So there should be a landing fee for that category of clientele. And in our report, we're suggesting an amount to go with it. Often the amount is tied to the maximum takeoff weight. So MTOW, that's the maximum takeoff weight of the aircraft. And you tie your landing fee to that weight category. In terms of hangar leasing, so right now you own only one hangar, which is the former PEMAIR building. It's out there at $8 a square foot, and that's about the average in the industry. So we're not suggesting any change there. But if you're getting a potential tenant open for a long-term lease, potentially you could reduce that rate for a 10, 15, 20-year lease. The other approach with rate and fee is your main tenant. So your main tenant today is Cornwall Aviation. are already paying $310 a month to access the airport, so about $3,700 a year. They operate 7 aircraft, well, they were prior to the pandemic. The other caveat here, and probably the biggest one, is that they operate their own fuel tanks, and the airport is not collecting fuel flowage fee on that fuel. Cornwall Aviation is also a partner to the airport, so they operate, and you're under contract with them to operate the radio / the Unicom system. So here our thought process was both how can we help the airport, but as well how can we manage a partner in your operation. So what we're suggesting is that the first step, a fuel flowage fee should be imposed to Cornwall Aviation, but as well the same fuel flowage should apply to any other tenants who bring in their own fuel at the airport. So it should be uniform across the board. Fuel at the airport, there's a fuel flowage fee that is imposed. Average is 2 to 7 cents. So there you've got leverage. Maybe for a tenant like Cornwall Aviation who buys and uses a lot of fuel, your amount is lower. For someone who brings in barrel for its own operation, the amount is higher. So yours to decide, but at least you've got the parameters to do it. The other approach was to look at a methodology how to charge Cornwall Aviation for their access to the airport. So what we are suggesting is that you use your aircraft parking fee. So the Cornwall Aviation is a bit of a unique situation where they own their own property and building with direct access to the airport. Most flight schools, what they'll do is they'll pay the monthly aircraft parking fee to have their aircraft at an airport. So what we're suggesting here is that you set up the same business model with Cornwall Aviation and charge them a monthly parking fee of $69 to $69 presently for their 7 aircraft, which would put the fee to the monthly cost at $483. If you were to raise that amount to $80 as we recommend, then Cornwall Aviation would pay $560 a month. So it's not big dollars per se. Again, we're trying to give you a methodology that meets what we've seen elsewhere and on which it's clear to all parties why they're paying that amount. But the fuel flowage fee will be the key component here on which they technically should be imposed. Airport funding. And you've been privileged to the various discussions between both parties. I think the notion of funding the airport has been in front of you for many years now and has created a lot of situations. So our thought process here was to say, okay, how can we look at the future? Let's forget the past. Can we look at the future? And for us, there's 2 things looking at the future. First, airport operations, how can we make those sustainable? And that's what we've been showing in the last few slides. Then there's the future of airport infrastructure. How do we rehabilitate that infrastructure or pay for a new one? And here we're suggesting the development of an airport fund. Where would the money be coming from? So what we're suggesting is that all new buildings at the airport starting in 2022, that a portion of those taxes go to the development fund instead of coming to the township, okay? So that it would have an impact in some fashion on your budget, but we're not suggesting to take anything away. So we're not going backward, we're looking ahead. So if there's a new building in 2022 that comes up, so there'll be a tax rate and a tax on it. So we're suggesting that a portion. So the portion could be 1%, could also be 100%. That we're leaving to both communities to decide. But the vision in the end is that as that fund grows, that the interests are used, so not the capital, but the interests are used to cover airport development expenses and rehabilitation. So let's say after a few years, there's $100,000 in there. At 5%, you'll get 5,000. Not much, but over 10, maybe after 20 years, well, there's $1 million in there, and then you're getting 50 to 75,000 a year in interest. And after 40 years, there's $2.5 million in there, and then you're getting 200,000 or something like that. So looking at the long term, that the airport will be there for the next 100 years, how can we build this fund by a methodology which is in the end not costing anyone? For sure, the township is losing part of the revenues, but you're also not asked to provide more money. So there's maybe a trade-off on your end, and for sure it's a discussion between both parties at the table. But that's a methodology that we've seen elsewhere that we're suggesting. Finally, well, second to last slide, staffing. So right now you have an airport manager who does the daily work at the airport, but from his own saying, he's not a marketer, so he's not doing marketing, he's not doing investment attraction, he's not an economic development leader and specialist, and that's the reality of most airport managers, especially a small airport. So they're individuals, they're public works individuals quite often. So we're suggesting here that the Airport Commission hires a business development specialist. Being mindful of funding, that individual is not needed 5 days a week. It's needed a day and a half a week, but someone that has the task and the objective to bring in more hangars. So instead of waiting for people to show up maybe one a year, can we drive business where we'll get 2, 3, 4, 5 hangars, new hangars on site every year? So that's the vision behind this individual. That individual will look at the marketing tools to drive that. He will carry out a business development outreach campaign to bring the pilots in. He could also manage the aviation tourism packages. So suggesting that someone be officially dedicated to carrying that mandate. But again, to someone doing a day a week should be sufficient. And finally, there needs to be kind of a marketing campaign, needs to have marketing material behind it to support the airport. If you choose not to go with a business development individual, having this marketing material would also be needed. We've put in a budget of about $25,000 to produce that that material and activities over 3 years, keeping in mind that the flight the flying packages are here. So if we can get a grant, we're already saving about $3,000 here. So there are a way of reducing that budget if need be. But that's kind of the vision behind the business development plan. Finally, so the phase one development approach. So again, going ahead, hiring that business development lead, structuring the marketing campaign, and launching the activities to do it. Develop the flying packages with the tourism leaders, build up the distribution lists, and then, yes, start expanding the general aviation area, so both parcel A and C. So we saw these 3 main tasks occurring between now and the end of 2023. So you're already starting to attract people over the next 2-3 years. Then the big phase is phase 2. It extends from 2024 all the way to 2027. And that includes the runway expansion, the relocation of the airport road. So moving ahead with all the development in parcel A. And once all of that is done, then phase 3, which is 2028 and beyond, it's relooking at all of the non-aviation parcels of land to try to generate more money from those. Mr. Mayor, this is all on my presentation.
All right, thanks very much, Mr. Pro, for your presentation this evening. It went through quite a bit in regards to where the airport's at and where we're hoping to go in the future. So I will open it up to questions from members of council at this present time for either Mr. Perot or any of the members of the commission. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Perot, for your presentation. I have 2 questions, and I apologize if you've touched on this already or if my ignorance of airport operations is showing too largely. When it comes to how the airport is running today, assuming no improvements, I'm trying to get a sense of where it is in terms, and I don't know if this is appropriate terminology to use, but in terms of its utilization, like in terms of how many planes it can accommodate in terms of people coming in and leaving. Can you give me a sense of where it is? If we don't make any changes, where is it in terms of how it's being used today?
Okay. The airport is hosting about 10,000 movement annually. So there's plenty of room in terms of what we call landing slots. So you could easily go to 30, 35, 40,000 on the present runway. You would have some congestions probably on weekends. There is already a bit of congestion on the weekend, especially with the flight schools. So when they're doing patterns, you've got 3, 4 aircraft just turning around, landing, taking back off. Sometimes it could be contentious for a private owner to find a slot to slide into. But in terms of the use of the runway, there's still plenty of use available. That's a bit why we're suggesting Parcel C goes ahead first. So you've got room to expand, very limited cost to the airport, and you would make more use of the runway. For sure, as if you're not moving ahead with the runway expansion, you won't be able to attract larger jets. So those that are not afraid to pay higher rates to park an aircraft higher and take on 400, 500, 600 liters of fuel at a time versus a small private aircraft will take on 75 or 100. So those jets are really the multipliers. But again, the jets need a reason to come in. So through our consultation, we did meet a few local companies that have jets that are going to either Kingston, Ottawa, Montreal right now, because the runway is not long enough. But again, so that jet may come in 10 times a year. So that jet alone would not cover the expense of building an extended runway. But it's a bit of, if you build it, they will come. So there's part of that. If you look at Peterborough as an example, so Peterborough had a 5,000 foot runway. They were able to attract flying colors. So they do aircraft refinishing. So when an aircraft comes out of the production, let's say at Bombardier, it's covered with a green shield. It's not painted. The interior is very minimal. Usually there's just a pilot and a co-pilot seat and minimal equipment. So they go to flying colors. And if, let's say, I'll give you an example, if they purchase a Global Express, a Bombardier, that cost is $55 million. Well, they'll go to flying colors and they'll spend another 10 to 12 million on redoing the aircraft interior, the aircraft painting. So it's big bucks. These people don't mind, say, $100 here, a few $100 there, $1,000 there. So that's a very nice clientele, but we need to find the right way to bring them in.
Subsequent, Mr. Mayor? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that explanation. That's very helpful. My other question is the fuel flowage fee. If you could just explain what's the logic behind charging? Why do you think we're entitled to, or why does the industry do that?
Yes, it's a funding mechanism for the entire industry. So all airports across Canada do it, or I should say most airports across Canada do it. It's a way to generate more revenues. So if you're purchasing the fuel at, I'll say, make it easy, $1 a liter, and you're reselling it at $1.02, well, you're making 2 cents on every liter. So there are variations. So in this case here, so let's say you're purchasing at $1, you're selling your own fuel potentially at $1.25, $1.35. So there you're making 25 cents to 30 cents. But it's basically the logic behind it. It's that the airport is your property. So anyone who uses or sells fuel on your property, there's a, let's call it a tax of 2 cents on every liter that they have to pay.
Okay.
And yeah, the aviation world's accustomed to that.
And does it reflect like a level of risk of in case someone has a spill or something like that, or is it not
No,
related?
no, a pure revenue generation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor McDonnell, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your presentation. I guess part of my question had to do with the fuel flowing charge as well, but I guess that clears that up. I guess kind of the comment or the question I had was more or less, we've always heard that it's expensive to do business at Maribel or at some of the other airports out that way, and we would be, a prime location. Do you feel as a consultant, do you feel that's an accurate comment, or are we looking at a pie in the sky theory? I know you say if we build it, they, potentially they will come, but it's a big potential for us to spend that kind of money just to expand the runway.
As part of our mandate, we did conduct a survey of manufacturers. So we wanted to understand, because one of the comment that was raised at the commission meeting was, let's try to bring some of the Greater Montreal aerospace manufacturers at our airport, lesser cost than Mirabel, Trudeau, and the others. So at that time, we got confronted to the reality of infrastructure at the airport. So no water, no sewer, issues with cell phone and connectivity to internet. So I think, and those are our key components. The other one would be labor. So my initial thought and my answer would be, I think we stand better chance of trying to attract aviation operation activity and less aircraft manufacturing opportunity. So flight training, maintenance, refurbishing. I think we stand a better chance around those sectors than the manufacturing side of it, which logically doesn't really need an airport unless they've got test aircraft. So if I look at the AODF Tech landing gears per se on the South Shore and in Laval, so they're manufacturing parts, aircraft parts, aircraft landing gears, they don't need to be at an airport. So if they were to look for outside of Quebec and look at your region, it would probably locate in one of the industrial parks that's already serviced with public transit and so on. So that's why I'm taking more the aviation side, less the manufacturing side.
Okay, no, perfect. And I guess those priorities for servicing would be would you consider those a priority for us? Or I guess obviously if we want to expand that way, we need those services. Should we be more or less investing that money as opposed to waiting for it and maybe treating it like roads and bridges type of thing and investing dollars to get that connectivity, cell phone service, etc.?
Mr. Mill, I don't know if you want to jump in, because we did, there was a funding program that came out from the federal government just a month or two ago. And then we completed on your behalf a funding application, and we included the equipment required to upgrade cell phone and internet access at the airport in that funding application, which is being studied right now by FedDev. So that component hopefully might be covered in that grant application. For regular infrastructures like the water, sewer, it's still quite a way to go. So from the distance, I think it's on Highway 27. So we've got, I think, 2 kilometers to bring everything in. In that sense, it's doable, but maybe, and that was part of the discussions we had with the commission. Maybe if we're to do that, we're opening it up not just for aviation or aerospace activity, but we're looking at doing a light industrial park on some of the lands for other activities to kind of support that cost coming in and not base it just on aerospace. But that's a separate conversation.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Is there any other further questions from members of council? You got three members that sit on the airport commission, so we've been through this a couple of times, so I guess our questions maybe have been answered in previous meetings. But Mr. Burrow, thank you very much for attending this evening, and thank you for your presentation and the explanation that you gave us this evening. And hopefully we see some type of an expansion at the airport in the future. So thanks very much for attending.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good night. Okay, so next on the agenda is to go into closed session, but prior to doing that, I would like to, on behalf of the members of council and staff, to wish Mr. Mills a happy, probably 51st birthday this evening. So happy birthday, Mr. Mills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
So I have a motion moved by Councillor Stephanie Jaworski, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that the council of the Township of South Glengarry convene to close session at 8:01 p.m. to discuss the following items under Section 239 of the Municipal Act SO 2001. A meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied for negotiations carried on by the municipality, information report, contract negotiations, labor relations, or employee negotiations, information report staffing. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you.